was 2016 and I had just started a new job at a motel. It was low pay, but I needed an office job. One of my friends, Michael, got me this job. For a few days I did training with the owner in the mornings. For 2 nights Michael trained me. Our job was the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing exciting, checking guests in and doing paperwork. My boss, the owner, went away with his wife on vacation for a week, which is attributed to the swift training I had to endure. So it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with security cameras around the motel's property, and large glass windows all around the office building with a glass door. There was no night window like most motels have. It was fairly early in the night. At about 1 a.m. I was just doing my normal check-in paperwork when a man walks in and asks if we have any rooms available. Usually if someone is sketchy, my boss has me lie and say no, but he seemed normal at the moment. Without hesitation I said, "Yes, of course, just for one," and he replies yes. So I begin creating the reservation on the computer when I notice he starts swatting the air and making spitting noises, as if he's being surrounded by flies. I try to ignore it. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't my business. So I try to check him into the room quickly as possible. I give him his key, and he's on his way. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door and causes me to jump. Absolutely frightened, I look up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door and puts his head through and says, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" And my only defense is trying to be helpful, so I replied, "Maybe there's something wrong with your key, let me give you another one." The look he had in his eyes was inexplicable. I felt like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key and he went back to his room. I tried texting Michael because he is the one who trained me, though it was the middle of the night and he was asleep. I needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back. I go into absolute panic mode. I run into the back office and lock the door, and I pull out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when working at night. I hear the man in the office yelling, "Hello, hello, why won't you let me in my room? Do you not like me?" Me being an absolute idiot and not standing my ground and calling the police when I'm feeling scared, I decided to take this situation on alone. I reply, "I'm just on the phone, I'll be right out." I then start calling Michael over and over for help. No answer. I decided to take a few deep breaths and then step out of the office. The man was not there, he was in the bathroom. I started hearing him angrily saying, "Killer, killer." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police, he comes out and I say, "Your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long-sleeved sweater, so with my arms down I was able to hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I begin to walk outside, and he seemed insistent to walk behind me. We begin making our way to the staircase and up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, continuously looking behind me to make sure he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room, and I stop at his room a few doors down. I smile and say, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This is your room," as it clearly said on the door. The whole time he was going to someone else's room and trying to open the door. I felt bad for them. I quickly ran back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns away. I felt bad for confiding in them about the guy, but they seemed willing to keep an eye and ear out. The next night the man came back, but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I explained to my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take me seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for the next year, where many other strange encounters happened. If you ever feel uncomfortable, always call the police. In the second half of 1998, I had taken a job as a security guard at a plant that made locks. Being a kid, I usually worked one of 3 shifts, 4 p.m., 12 a.m., 7:30 p.m., 3:30 a.m., 12 a.m., 8 a.m. The 7:30-3:30 shift was for extra coverage, so there were always 2 of us there from 7:30 to midnight. It was a routine, boring job for the most part. We did our rounds, logged anything out of the ordinary, and watched a tiny monitor displaying the CCTV feed. Things went by in an almost painfully normal manner for 6 months. I worked, saved, bought a car, and planned a move. By late March of '99, I served my notice and prepared to head cross-country. A new hire was brought in to fill my spot, a soft-spoken man named Calvin. As part of his training, Calvin spent time working at all hours. At night, he was a shadow, working with myself and the other night guard, getting a feel for the plant's nocturnal routines. Most nights he worked with myself and Amira, a female guard who was around my age. I was 18 at the time. Calvin, who was about a decade older, was quiet and polite, though something seemed to be missing. There's a spark that genuinely nice people seem to have, and he didn't possess it. Whenever he went on rounds with me, he'd ask questions about the job and make small talk. I noticed that he was a little odd, laughing at odd times and changing his tone mid-sentence. At the time, I chalked it up to him being awkward. That wouldn't last. One night, near the end of his first week, he went on rounds with Amira. When they returned to the office, I knew something was wrong. Normally talkative, she would barely say a word. Not sure what had occurred, I waited until Calvin has gone to the restroom to ask. During their trip, everything had been normal until they reached the brass mill, a portion of the plant that shut down at 6 p.m. There were usually no employees there after that time and no lights. They were making their way to a checkpoint on a landing atop a flight of stairs when the mood shifted. She told me that she turned around only to find that he was right on her. Startled, she backed against the grating at the end of the landing and he leaned in towards her, his face nearly touching hers. He flirted in a low voice, and when she mentioned his wedding band, he said it would be over soon. From then on, I did the rounds, taking Calvin with me each time. The night ended without further incident, and I left a note for our supervisor detailing what had occurred. The next night came and went with no Calvin. I did the rounds while Amira stayed in the locked office, same thing the night after. Then, on my second to last shift, I come in to find her freaking out. She found out why Calvin hadn't been at work. He had been arrested for murdering his wife. She had been dismembered and burned, parts of her body placed in a pond less than a mile from where we worked. That night and the next, Amira called the jail just to make sure that they were still holding him. Based on the time frame, he had killed his wife months before he started the job. A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I'm a woman and was 31 at the time. I know to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store, and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think I would have that many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was on a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute checked the trash. It was time for a cigarette, and I had one headphone in, kinda jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much-needed piss. Against the sheriff's office, though? Yeah, the building closed at 4 p.m. and didn't open again till 6 the next morning, but why? By the back of his ripped white t-shirt, I remembered that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell. He had a good buzz going. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off of him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me, and back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I still had half a smoke burning and had left my dustpan outside with the squeegee. We both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly engage in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. The man was still there but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he's yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk and can barely stand straight, still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off of him this time. I just slowly walked back into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during graveyard jobs has been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst ones. I didn't like it at all and wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go and 2 before any other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the counter on my way to the doors when I saw that he'd walked across the road to my side now. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. My hand mimed the hand signal for cut across my neck, basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here, we're closed." I shook my head back and forth too, hoping to further discourage him. He started walking away but screamed something at me while he's walking. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an asshole or anything. I mean like he was at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job, I got really skeeved out. I decided to call the cops. It's a good thing too, because the minute I hung up with them there, he comes again up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it trying to ram it. Not that it would have done any good. I made the mistake of telling him that I had called the cops. I say I made the mistake of telling him because once I said that, he took off. The police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour, but found no one. He was on foot, so I don't get where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have had to spend the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I'll never know what the right choice was. I'm just glad I don't work there anymore.